he said in therapy, I'm really scared that they're not going to want me anymore. Well, and he had some reasons to be scared about that. We still loved him. We still wanted him. We actually told the caseworkers, we're like, listen, my mom, who lives about 10 minutes away from us, my mom will raise him, wants to raise him, is asking to raise him, so he can still be a member of the family and also not be around his brother. He was really aggressive about trying to touch his brother even after everything came out. He just didn't know how to stop. The purity was gone. And it was taken from him, granted, but it was gone. He didn't look at kids the way other people look at kids. Other kids look at each other. Kids were, again, a means to an end, a means to sexual gratification for him. And so that was kind of his dark side. I mean, he had all these other great properties, but that was the one thing that was kind of holding him back. Mm-hmm. And he didn't know how to separate himself. He didn't know how to look at his brother like a brother. His brother was a means to a sexual end for him. And his brother was like, I want to live with you guys. I don't want him living with me, because that was his boogeyman. His brother was his boogeyman, the youngest. His parents came forward and said, can we raise the oldest? We would like for him to be a part of this family. We don't want him to not be a part of this family. We just want him in a household where there aren't any other kids. All of the caseworkers, both the one that they gave us and the one that we found, all of the therapists, said that they should not be reared together, that that the youngest should live with us because he was clearly bonded and thriving, and that the oldest should be placed someplace where he is the youngest child, and a good age difference from the children, older, or the only child in a home.
Yeah, but they had to be moved before too much more stuff come out. Otherwise,
that's his theory.
Otherwise, they would have to report a lot more information to the next placement.
Well, what we think happened is in the very last meeting that the caseworker and the guardian ad litem had with the boys, we got an email after that saying, we're a little confused about why the boys want passports to go to Alaska. Well, the boys got passports for our trip to the Bahamas. And they known we were going to the Bahamas and that we were going to be doing this trip, and we'd been talking about it for months. And
since the very, very beginning.
The caseworkers had to sign off on the paperwork to let us take them to get their passports to begin with. You guys are old enough to know that that's ridiculous, and why would we tell the boy something like that? Earlier that day is when his parents had called and offered to raise the oldest. And the oldest got real excited about the idea of living where the moose live, in Alaska. And that's his family's from Alaska. And so he got really excited about that prospect. They also had just gotten their passports in the mail recently. We never said they needed a passport to go to Alaska. That's ridiculous and asinine, and we don't lie to the kids.
Was going to Alaska.
We never said anybody was. We said, listen, we don't know anything. We're just going to put that forward for the caseworkers to know. It's up to them. They have all the power. They get to make all the choices. We're just trying to help. Then they say, well, and we're also confused as to why you're making the oldest call you Mr. and Mrs., and rather than mom and dad. So I turned to the oldest. I said, baby, why did you say that you don't call us mom and dad? And he goes, well, they kept asking me if I had to call you Mr. and Mrs., and they didn't like my answer, and I felt like I had to tell them yes, that's what happens. Well, he's got a really interesting story to kind of piggyback on that one about when...
when they came back from the questioning...
That we were questioned about.
Right. His first words were, Dad, why is that car in the driveway?
Someone was delivering flowers to me.
So she got a really weird look on her face. She
heard him call him Dad, and then for some reason felt the need to put in an email that we were forcing him to call, and so we responded back in an email and said, why is it that our son feels pressured
to change his
answer to suit you? They were gone after that.
Yep. Anyway, long story short, that's what went down.
Caseworkers, guardian ad litems can bite me.
Certain people don't.
I haven't met a caseworker I like.
Certain people abuse their power, and the people who lose are the kids that don't have family.
The move of the boys had more to do with the caseworker and the guardian ad litem's egos than it did for what the boys needed. Both therapists were saying that the boys needed to be in our home. They made passionate pleas that the youngest needed to be in our home. They both thought it was a great idea to keep the boys within the family, because then that relationship would be cemented, that they would still be a part of their family, but it would allow the oldest an opportunity to heal up, to regain some innocence, to be able to feel like a real kid again. No. Our job is to keep these boys together. Fine, keep them together. In the meantime, the youngest has to suffer, and the oldest doesn't get free.
Well, they both suffer. That was what we couldn't get them to understand, is they're both suffering.
Who's benefiting from this
and
arrangement?
They kept saying that the oldest is being victimized. No,
what about?
They're both being victimized. They've both been victimized.
We're like, okay, so we're victimizing him by asking for a family member to raise him that lives 10 minutes away?
That's not what they were.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is they're trying to say, they were like, oh, he's the victim. I'm like, listen, he is the victim. He didn't ask for that grown man to get up there and do those ridiculously evil things to him. But he took the vampire's kiss and became a vampire. And we need to address that. We need to address the fact that rather than being, because his younger sibling didn't do any acting out. In fact, in therapy, it came out that the oldest was really mad at the younger one because he wouldn't act out willingly. So he was violently perpetrating on his younger brother on a nightly basis for the last 2.5 years, now 3 years after the time they'd been in our home, and felt anger at his brother for not getting with it. This is a child who needs help. And it's not going to be helpful to put him in a household where there's lots of other kids. They gave us the advice. Both therapists said he can never be alone with any other children in the house. Are you kidding me? They also said he can never be unsupervised. They told us to put alarms and locks on the door.
And a camera.
They turned our house into Fort Knox. This was a prison up in here. This was like some state pen. No child should live like that. That child shouldn't live like that. And honestly, the oldest child, if he got the help he needed, could be an amazing gift to someone's family. But he needed help. And we weren't equipped. We already came with 3 kids. And in a household where the therapists are telling you no kid can be left alone, we didn't have any options. We had no options where he was concerned. This couldn't be the house for him.
Well, we couldn't risk the kids that we already had.
Well, and one of the scenarios we told him when we realized it was all going bad was we said, listen, let's pretend you're a doctor and 2 people come into your emergency room at the same time. One of them has a slice on his wrist and it's bleeding like crazy. The other one has a gash coming from his neck all the way down through his hip, and his guts are hanging out and he's got blood and gore all over the place. Who needs to be helped first? And he goes, the one with the blood and guts. Yeah. Who is going to take the longest to help? The one with the blood and guts. Absolutely. And in the meantime, what's happening to the person with the slice on his wrist? He's bleeding slowly to death. Yep. Baby, our household is filled with people with slices on their wrist. Baby, but you're the one with the slices from here to there, and you didn't put that on you. Somebody else did that mess to you. But you need a lot of time, and you need a lot of attention from people who can give you that time and attention, and it's not your fault. We're just not that household. We can't do it. We already have 3 others, and I don't want them bleeding to death either. He understood. Wants us to be in their lives as like auntie and uncles. It's just the caseworkers who were retarded. I am not a fan of, and I mean that, I am not a fan of child protective services, whatever these people are, because ultimately I don't believe that they really care about kids. At least in our situation, they don't. These boys, both of them could have had homes and finality, a last name, and a family. But because the caseworkers wanted to keep them together, they couldn't have those things. I'm going to get back.
Yeah, they wanted to be right.
They wanted to be right.